In the Clive Barker Podcast, longtime fans Ryan and Jose interview guests, bring you the news, and take deep dives into Barker-related stuff. In episode 479, we revisit the Book Club of Blood for the fourth story, Pig Blood Blues. We talk about the comic adaptation and the unfilmed script by Anthony DiBlasi. This episode is sponsored by Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination. Don Bertram is a longtime friend of Clive and advocate of his art, but Don's unique and inspiring paintings are for sale, and over 50% of the proceeds go to the Arts and Medicine program at the Texas Children's Cancer Center. There's even a paver in Washington, D.C. representing Celebrate Imagination. We're thrilled that this worthy cause is sponsoring our podcast again this year, and we hope that you'll consider looking over the Etsy shop to buy one of his original paintings or books. Follow the link in the show notes or click the side banner and let's see what's new with Don Bertram today. Check out his recent painting, The Innocent, on Facebook. Also check out his newest video on YouTube detailing the best cutlery gallery prints or art photos. We recently made this video public from our Patreon exclusive playlist. Hey, if you want to help us out, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/BarkerCast589. Our subscribers will get exclusive access to content not available anywhere else, like our Collector's Corner video series, rare Barker videos, and early behind-the-scenes stuff. Our supporters get to help us choose episode topics and even join us on the podcast. Our supporters also get access to the exclusive channel in our Discord server. We'll be forever grateful if you consider helping us out and subscribing to our Patreon. We owe everything to this circle of magicians, so let's give a shout out to our Patreon supporters and see what's new on Patreon. A shout out to the circle of magicians who make this possible: David Anderson, Erik Van T Holt, Daniel Elven, Amanda Stewart, Bradley Gartz, our newest member Markus, and of course Don Bertram for sponsoring us. Our supporters now get to see a new article by Jose Leitao, Hellraiser Virtual Dreams by Color Dreams. It's about a Hellraiser video game that never happened. Welcome, this is episode 479 of the Clive Barker Podcast, the Book Club of Blood, and it's good to see you again, Jose. How's it going?
Hey, Ryan, it's going well. It's been kind of a rough week for me, but had to make some hard decisions, but yeah, it's I feel much better about it. I think I did the right call, and I had to do what was best for me. But I'm glad to be here with you, doing this thing that we've been doing for 13 years now.
Yeah, we just started our 14th year.
That's right.
Yeah,
we are.
So, in speaking of that, we're revisiting what we talked about in episode 2, right? Was the Books of Blood Volume 1 was our second ever episode we did way back in January of 2012. And so now we are we're in the Book Club of Blood. And before we get there though, I want to welcome our new Patreon member, Markus. Thanks,
Hey.
Markus. Yeah, I thought it was Marcus Williams, but it's a different Markus. He spells
Different Markus. Thank you, Markus, for joining us. I hope that we can keep you entertained.
Yeah. So thanks, Markus. And so today we are on the story Pig Blood Blues, which is, I think, the fourth story in the Books of Blood Volume 1.
Yeah. This is a really weird one, but also one that
depressing too.
Yeah. It's not like it's not like there's a hero story and the hero wins at the end. So
Yeah, I was I was digging through our archives of stuff that we've collected since, we've been doing this podcast, and I found that, hey, we've got this screenplay for that was written by Anthony DiBlasi for Pig Blood Blues that never happened. So we have a copy of that. So we got to read that too, and we'll talk about the differences between the short story and that film that never happened.
That's also right. Yeah, that was supposed
a comic adaptation in Tapping the Vein.
That's right. I think it's book one, I think,
One, yeah,
starts
Tapping the Vein,
Human
Volume One.
Remains and Pig
Yeah,
Blood Blues, adapted
and
by
it's
Scott Hampton.
this morning I was trying to remember which volume of Tapping the Vein that was in, and I did a Google search, and it came up with a Barker Cast tag archive, and it was Pig Blood Blues. I'm like, wow, why didn't I just start there at our website? And so, but we have on our website, and I put a link in the show notes, Tapping the Vein Volume One retro review by Andrew Copp. Do you
Yeah.
remember when he was doing all those comics
The retro
reviews?
reviews. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, he was really big into the. He wanted to just talk about comics.
Yeah. This morning I read the story, I read the script, and I read the comic book adaptation. And
Wow.
I was looking around and I did find the thread that you created on Reddit last night,
Oh yeah,
announcing, yeah, on the Clive Barker subreddit, where you were saying that we were going to talk about this. And there's a interesting amount of comments there too.
yeah. I posted those in our show notes here, so we'll get to them too. But yeah, Pig Blood Blues. So it's interesting. I guess first of all, it's kind of interesting for them to think that this could be made into a movie, because I guess in a way it's sort of like a prison movie, right? There's not
Yeah,
it's all pretty much all male characters, um,
that's right. With one
except for one.
very, very icy female character here. And of course, the
Yeah,
sow.
right, right. I guess yes, it's true. Yeah, and so we've got Redmond, who is an ex cop, and I think a disgraced ex cop, and he's trying to. So he's taken this job working at the tether down, which is like a juvenile hall kind of a place. It's a place where juvenile delinquents go in lieu
It's
of prison because they're
a
too young.
borstal, right? A youth detention center. Um,
Yeah.
It's funny because I looked up tether down, and when you start with the name itself, right? Tether down,
Hmm.
it sounds like someone who's been like tied down
Right.
and put away.
Yeah.
So there's that. But there is actually a tether down school in London. Um, Not spelled the same way. It doesn't have the e at the end and down, but that's just a primary school in London. So I was just
Yeah.
wondering if Clive was aware of that when he created that name. I don't think he went to that particular school, but it's just a primary school in London. It's not a borstal
Oh.
or anything like that. But I like to Google sometimes the names that I find in the stories, and I did
Yeah.
locate that that was actually a school in London. So I thought that's
Oh.
interesting.
Yeah. And was he living in London, I think, when he wrote the Books of Blood?
That's
Trying to
right. Yeah,
remember.
as far
I
as I
think
know,
so.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Um
Um,
and so we have the two adaptations, of course, and we'll get into the differences. I was a little worried that, especially with the movie script, I was a little worried that I would, in my mind, confuse the facts on, what happened in which one, the movie versus the short story,
it's a
because there
bit
are some pretty
different.
key differences between the movie version and
That's
the
true.
short
That's
story.
true. So, like you said, there's this guy Redman who's a policeman. I think I wouldn't say he was disgraced. I think he explains in the story at some point that they wanted to put him on a desk job, but he really didn't want to do a desk job,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
why they kind of pushed him out because he wanted to. You get the feeling that he wanted to be out in the streets. Is kind of like a he got tired of putting away the same people over and over, and he finally came to the conclusion that maybe he should try helping them before they fall into the system.
You also kind of got a little bit from the short story. You got a little bit of a feeling that he was like the '80s stereotype of a cop,
Hmm.
right? That you know, like they're gonna throw the book at you, and and that would played by his own rules and that kind of stuff, and so they he was a liability, so they were gonna make him do a desk job. Uh,
Yeah, there's some. I mean, not some. There's a lot. It's a lot on the nose or on the snout, I should say.
yeah,
The symbolism between him being a cop and this, involving a pig, and
yeah,
um, there's even the beginning when he's talking to Leverthal, who's this psychologist lady that works at Tetherdown,
hmm
where the way that it's described him talking like, oh, do they, the word pig comes up to describe him as a cop, and he says he grunted. It's like, it's like, yeah, like a pig
Yeah.
would grunt. So you
Yeah.
start seeing those
Yeah.
allusions, that equivalence there.
Yeah. One thing I was thinking about as I was reading the story too is that this is almost a sort of a really dark version of Charlotte's Web,
Oh,
and then as you're reading the movie
the,
version,
the
they
script.
stick they yeah you're reading the script, they actually come out right out and say that, and
Right.
there's like people leaving copies of the book Charlotte's Web all over the place, because like, oh,
Yeah.
because you're a pig, to Redmond, and
There's
it's like,
the
oh,
part I
I
was,
get it, ha ha, I'm a
yeah.
pig.
So the reason why they bring him in is because I think they believe that bringing in a former policeman would help Tether Down get more funding from the authorities. So he's
Yeah,
like he's a token guy, right? So he kind of doesn't take that very kindly when he understands that. When he's asking, I'd like to know what the boys have been told, and she asks, "Been told about me?" Well, something of your background. I see. They'd been warned. Here comes the pigs. And then she says, it
yeah,
seemed important. He grunted. I thought
yeah,
that was interesting. But immediately while he's talking to her on his first day, they see outside that there's an altercation going on, right? There's some fight, there's a pursuit, and then there's a fight. And then they run outside, and there's these two kids fighting, or I should say, one is beating another one into a pulp.
yeah.
And
Thomas Lacey is the kid, or Lacey, I guess they just call kids by their last names.
that's right.
Lacey is the one being chased and beat up and stuff, and they said he tried to escape out the bathroom window, I think.
Yeah. And so, they he realizes that Leverthal doesn't really care too much about who started what or punishing anything. And he starts to feel that this place has kind of found its own beat where they're just really not doing much for the kids. They're just kind of keeping them there. They're kind
Yeah,
of managing them, processing them, but not really like helping them at all.
yeah,
And I think he gets a little taken by this kid Lacey because he's just he's just vulnerable, I guess. He's vulnerable, and he at one point he's lying on the floor and they're taking him away in a stretcher, and he just focuses on his eyes, and his eyes just Lacey's eyes just open and reach out to Redmond almost like pleading for help.
yeah, yeah, and and the more that Redmond learns from Lacey about what's going on, it's really tough to believe, right? It's like, oh yeah, it's Hennessy and he's a ghost.
Yeah.
He's
Later
it's
that
hard to tell
day,
people you're running away from a ghost when he clearly just saw him running away from another kid.
yeah. Later that day that he goes to visit Lacey as he's recovering from the beating. And that's when they talk about, so, he was trying to escape through the bathroom window, like you said. And then he tries to reach out to him, and he another thing that's funny about this is that there's a governor for this school, but the governor never really shows up until near the end, which we'll get
Yeah,
to that.
yeah,
So the main authority figure in this whole school is actually missing through most of it
right. And it's
because,
always like, oh yeah, well, we'll get you a message to him. Don't
yeah,
worry about it. He's probably off at one of those seminars, where they're learning how to get more funding for detention centers. It's no big deal. If you leave him a message, we'll make sure he gets it.
yeah,
And that kind of
uh,
starts off with a feeling of like a conspiracy.
that's right.
Yeah,
It does get to that point, but like you said, Lacey brings up this story about this kid Hennessy that Leverthal had told him before that he had escaped the school. He had disappeared, but Lacey tells him he doesn't disappear. He's here. He's here, but he's like in the walls. He listens. And then he says he's a ghost because he killed himself. So that's a pretty high. Yeah, that's a pretty tall accusation to bring up that a kid under these people care killed himself and nobody really talks about it or acknowledges it. Um, so
well,
that,
they even gaslight him and tell him, oh yeah, that he ran away.
yeah. Um, so there's a farm, right? There's a farm in this place too. There's like a barn and a small farm where I guess this would be for like maybe some kind of therapy for the kids.
Yeah, yeah.
But
To
it looks
teach
like
like
it's
responsibility and chores and stuff.
right, right. But it looks like it's pretty neglected, and
Hmm.
there's nothing but like waste and
Yeah,
you know,
it smells really bad because no one
smells
wants
really
to muck
bad.
out the stalls.
Which will, yeah, which will get that smell kind of masks another thing that's going on in there. But
Yeah,
he goes there and he sees that there's you know, it doesn't really mention any other animals other than the sow that's in there.
yeah,
So she kind of walks out. He looks at the sow looks at him, and this it's described in kind of a weird way, isn't it? It's like almost like a personal connection between two people, and you're like, this is just a pig, you know?
yeah. Yeah, well, and when Redmond sees the pig for the first time, he's like, "Wow, that is one like majestic looking animal."
Yeah, yeah. And then we kind of get a little bit of a hint of the pig state of mind, like, oh, this Redmond, this is the enemy. And like,
Yeah,
okay. Um, yeah, but it's such a strange it's such a strange description, you know, when he's looking at the pig. In the comic book story that had art by Scott Hampton,
hmm,
um, that is also a pretty cool um, that is also a pretty cool adaptation. I think if I can get that pulled up here, give me just a moment. I thought I had that pulled up, but yeah, I think it was Fred Burke and another guy that adapted the story, and Scott Hampton illustrated it. And I really love Scott Hampton. I've seen a lot of graphic novels by him, and he's a great artist. Um, but one thing that I thought was interesting that they added to the script version is that they made Redmond be a former um, inmate from Tetherdown, right? That he had
yeah,
been institutionalized at that place, but
yeah.
somehow he had, you know, gotten out and made him, you know, gotten straight and became a
And,
cop.
and he was trying to make things right for a wrong that he was a part of, in his past at that place. And so he's
Yeah.
like, well, he was a part of the problem, so now he wants to make things better for these other kids.
In the movie, I think that also, you know, helps him connect in a deeper way to the kids.
Yeah,
Whereas in the original short story, there's a moment where there's almost like a hint that maybe, and this comes from Leberthal, because she gets a
yeah,
little concerned. Why is he, you know, giving preferred treatment to Lacey? You know, because
yeah,
uh, you know, we shouldn't be, you know, just giving them preferential treatment. We should just keep them at a distance. But then there's a moment where he kind of like visualizes Lacey naked next to him. And we kind of wonder if this is like a subtext that maybe Redmond has some sort of
yeah,
feelings for the boys.
yeah. In the
Um,
short story, that's hinted at, and it
yeah,
never gets there, but it's kind of
that could be why he was pushed out of the police force, maybe. So, you know,
yeah,
or if it's just, it's given in an ambiguous way, which we don't know if he's just thinking that because he's thinking of what Leverthal might think he's after, or
right,
if
yeah.
he's actually thinking that because that's what he wants.
But in
So,
the movie, another huge key difference is that there's this sort of romantic interlude between Leverthal and
oh
Redmond.
yeah, yeah, that's
Right,
right,
and
that's
and
right.
the Leverthal character in the short story is really more cold and not happy with Redmond, and then
Right.
trying to just come here and do your job, don't ask any questions, and that's
Yeah.
kind of her relationship with him is just that. But in the movie, it's a little more devious, I guess.
It's a very repressed and very subdued environment throughout the whole story.
Yeah,
You know, even at the beginning when it says, you know, that the kids, you know, they had rules where you guys don't run, don't shout, don't whistle, don't fight. and there's bars on the windows, and you can smell the sour sweat of the kids in the hallways. It's
Yeah.
like you get this feeling like, this place is like, a lot of pain and suffering is going on in here. And
Yeah. Well, another
the
major key difference is in the movie version is that the movie version takes place over a while. It could have been weeks or
Mhm,
months. It's kind of
mhm.
hard to tell. And another thing and this is the part that I really didn't like about the script, is
Mhm.
that it did a lot of dream sequences, where something really bad would happen and then he would jump awake. And there was
Yes,
even one part in the script where that happened twice in a row.
that's right. That's right. Where he has these
Yeah.
dreams that he keeps waking up. Those are kind of the thing that made me like didn't dislike the Hellraiser sequel so much, was when they had those fake out dream sequences where they would do stuff
Yeah.
like that. And so I understand that for movies, they do have to find a way to like fill in some stuff and maybe
One
create
pad the
tension.
time.
Yeah, and create some tension by giving us scary sequences, because it is a scary movie, a scary story.
Yeah.
But I thought that was, yeah, I myself was the first and the second one. I was like, I'm not sure if this happening. What's going on? And this, oh no,
Yeah.
it's a dream. He's waking up. And it's
Yeah.
almost like the school is haunting Redman himself, right? Because
Yeah.
he's got a
Well, I
history
mean, they
there
they
in the
do
script.
work that into he talks about how he's having nightmares because of
Yeah.
being here, and he used to have night terrors when he was there the first time, and but still, it feels like the movie makers just wasted a bunch of our time, and just visualizing, imagining if I was sitting in the theater watching that movie, I would be mad. If
Yeah.
there was like four of them, right? I think
Right.
dream sequences where he's getting like killed or mobbed or whatever, and then he wakes up and it was all a dream.
Yeah. There's more pigs in there, but
Yeah.
here's what I was talking about. She said, um, her blushing pink frame radiant with good health, her sheer size impressed Redman. A
Oh
formidable
yeah.
creature, a glamorous animal in her gross way, with curling blonde lashes and delicate down on her shiny snout.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like it's almost being described, almost like describing almost like an attractive woman or something, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
made me feel a little weird and uneasy,
But he said
uh,
in a gross way.
in a
It's
gross way. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah. So, and then, yeah, it's.
So
Go ahead.
so Lacey, over the course of the story, when Lacey's talking to Redmond and telling him, what happened, he's like, "Oh no, he didn't run away. He killed himself. He hung himself in the pig stall."
Yeah.
Yeah, and you get hints over the course of the story that he wanted to be immortal, and he was almost like a cult leader amongst the kids in the in Tetherdown.
Right, right. That Leverthal says that he was like the Nietzschean Superman. Like he thought of himself as the Nietzschean Superman. That
Yeah,
he believed that if you became a man, then all you can do is die, and he didn't want to become a man. So
yeah,
he was 18, and then what happens is that we'll find that he hung himself, um, because he wanted to live forever. Um, he
yeah. Well,
thought of
and that's
himself
also
as
kind of the whole Christian idea, right? That if you want to be immortal, you have to die, which is
right, right.
weird kind of a weird kind of a contradiction.
He saw himself as distant from his other fellow people as he saw himself distant from the animals and the pigs in the farm. So that's
Yeah,
that's one thing that Leverthal mentions that. And yeah, so and then that
yeah,
night, Lacey shows up outside of Redmond's office and gives him a letter that he wants him to give to
yeah.
his mother, right? He
Yeah,
says,
and for me, that letter is probably the most haunting, the most poignant thing in the story, and it's also in the film version, right, in the script.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's really it really is kind of a gut punch, that letter. It's from a kid who's given up and knows that he's going to die, and there's nothing anybody can do to help him.
The letter said, Mama, they fed me to the pig. Don't believe them if they said I never loved you or if they said I ran away. I never did. They fed me to the pig. Um,
Yeah.
I found something looking for Pig Blood Blues. And of course, after reading the script, I was looking around for information. I found that Anthony DiBlasi, who we've mentioned before as the guy who wrote that script
Yeah.
for Dread, that had Anthony Breer be a Lamborghini used car
Right.
salesman.
Yeah.
He was working on that as well. Pig Blood Blues. He was planning to direct that one after Dread, but it just never happened. So I did find that last year he posted some promotional material that never made it to um, to be published. So one of them was the picture of the note that says they fed me to the pig. I think we'll add
Yeah.
that to the show notes. Um, it
Yeah.
started out when I started looking for the story about the adaptation for this. Um, this was at one point part of that Midnight Picture Show projects, right? That they were doing.
Right. Right. It was in that really short time frame when we had the Book of Blood, Dread, and Midnight Meat Train, and I think also that sci-fi movie Saint Sinner, right? Was They were all around really close to each other.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. And I remember this was around 2004, 2005 that they were working on this. Apparently, there was also a previous script before the Anthony DiBlasi one. There was another
Oh.
uh yeah, there was another one. There was
So
another
full
author
disclosure,
that
the
had
one that we
worked.
have doesn't have credits on it. Like the cover page is missing.
That's
So
true.
I'm
That's
not
true.
100% sure which one we have.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what we have is probably the DeBlasi one.
It seems like it is.
Probably. It's not,
Yeah.
there's no credits. Yeah, we're just assuming that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's back when Joe Daly and Midnight Picture Show was going to be working on 6 books of blood stories. It was going to be the Midnight Meat Train, Dread, um, the Pig Blood Blues,
Book of Blood.
the Madonna, Son of Celluloid, and Down Satan, I
Yeah.
think. And then there were a few other projects they were working. I mean, I found something that said that an interview with Clive, one of the revelatory interviews, I think Clive mentioned that Anthony DiBlasi was going to be working on the Edgar Allan Poe project and Pig Blood Blues and something else. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. So this script gets pretty wild. I mean, it gets a lot
Yes.
wilder than the story does.
Yeah, and there's a little bit. I mean, the whole premise of the short story anyway requires some suspension of disbelief, because
Sure.
you've got a pig that's possessed by a kid who hung himself, and then the pig ate him, and the kid transferred his consciousness over to this pig.
Yeah.
But there's even more suspension of disbelief in the movie version, because in the movie version, in one night, they keep repeatedly feeding people to the pig. I'm like, how much can this pig eat?
A lot.
Yeah.
He's pigging out.
Well, and it's
Uh,
because it's a movie, and they have to have a horror movie has to have a body count, or it
right.
seems that way, or there's the notion that if you don't, that it's not going to do well. And so they have all these guards, and and Tether Down is a way bigger place in the movie version than it is in the short story, because you've got all these disposable characters that you can
Right.
use, like guards and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. But going back to that night where he sees Lacey outside his office and he gives him that letter saying that they don't believe it if they say I
Yeah.
left, they fed me to the pig. Things start picking up a bit more in the story. So
Yeah.
there's
And that
there's a
letter, I should
commotion.
add that that letter shows up because Redmond finds it in Lacey's file in a box of
Hmm.
confiscated stuff, and you can see all these other letters that were never mailed to his parents.
Right.
And that's the latest one out of this pile of letters that they didn't send off, and that's where Redmond starts to see that there's a sort of a conspiracy afoot.
Yeah. And so that night it's strange. He feels strange that Lacey gave him that letter because it feels like it's almost like a last, send this to my loved
Oh
ones.
yeah, definitely like a last will and testament.
And he is listening to the recreation room sounds and he hears the TV is playing, but he doesn't hear anybody saying anything or the kids walking
Yeah,
around or any noise. He's like, that's weird. They're pretty quiet just watching that. So he goes into the rec room and he finds out that nobody's there. It's completely
yeah.
empty. And then
And
he
he runs
he's
into a kid, right?
yeah,
What is
he
his
runs
name?
into Slape.
Slape. Yeah,
Yeah, one of the kids that is described punching Lacey in the altercation at the beginning of the story. And he's just kind of blocking his way in the hallway, right? And he's got a knife, he's got a shank,
yeah,
and there's a confrontation. He's asking because when he's taking Lacey's letter to the office because he says, "Oh, I'm put this in the office so they can mail it." But then he kind of
yeah,
goes there and he's like, "I kind of promised them that I would, protect him." And he kind of puts the letter in his pocket. And that's when he finds out that, hey, everybody's really quiet in the rec room. And he realizes that they're all gone. And
yeah.
Lacey that he left with Slape is not there anymore. And Slape is holding a knife. So he's like, where is Lacey? He's like, oh, he's gone
Uh,
now. You can't,
he's like, I
you know.
don't know. He just left, and he's like, well, why didn't you stop him? I go, I don't know. Well, which way did he go? I don't know where he went. And
Yeah, it's like,
so Redmond's getting more and more angry and impatient. He's
yeah.
like, well, get out of my way then. And the kid's like, no, and pulls out his knife.
Well, he says
And
there's no way you can help him now. He's gone. Though he kind
yeah,
of he kind of admits that there's something going on with
yeah.
Lacey.
After a short time of their back and forth, and like I don't
Right.
know where he went. Then you start to hear the truth of it is that like yeah they're doing something sinister with him, and
Yeah.
you better not. And it's kind of like you better not try to interfere.
And they keep talking about Kevin or Hennessy, which is the kid that disappeared. And
Yeah,
it says, Kevin likes to come out and play every once in a while. And like Hennessy is like, yeah, well, I want to meet him. And he said, oh, soon. And then that's when they kind of start fighting. And, you know, Slape kind of tries to stab him, but he kind of disarms him and like keeps kneeing his groin against the wall and says to
yeah,
the kid, I can do this all night, dude. And, and then he just slides down and he says, where's Lacey? And then it's like, oh, Kevin's got him. And then as he goes on to go out to the farmland, because that's where the pigs are.
yeah,
Slape does one last attack, but unfortunately, Redmond kind of bends his hand and throws him onto the wall, but apparently the kid Slape stabs himself and dies, right?
yeah,
So that's when he runs out and he goes to see what's going on with Lacey because he understands there's some weird mythology thing going on here about this kid Kevin that killed himself and
mm,
the pig, and all the kids are kind of like creating this weird mythology, and he goes out there and he sees there are people coming out of some of the kids are coming out of the barn walking
yeah.
back towards the building, and they're kind of like in a trance almost, right?
Well,
They're
and
like
he's
kind of,
thinking, I have to try. And he's like, I know that if they're all armed the way that Slape kid was armed, I'm in
yeah,
big trouble. But he's like, I
yeah,
have to try. I have to try. I promised him. And that's the theme throughout the whole story. Is like, I promised this kid I'd protect him.
yeah.
And what if I can't? So, and that's his main fear. And he's even willing to throw his whole life away on this promise.
Yeah, but he sees these kids walking away from the barn and they're all almost like in a trance in this kind of
Yeah.
very subdued, ceremonial, almost reverent kind of mood. And he
Yeah.
goes there and he starts to see that the all the kids are there.
And Leverthal is there.
Yeah, the psychologist, she's there
Yeah.
too. And
And all the pretense is gone, right? The veil kind of lifts, and he's let in on the conspiracy, and it's kind of like they're thinking you're probably not going to survive this, so we don't really care whether you figure it out or not.
yeah, yeah. And it's the smell of excrement is always pervasive throughout this whole story. They're always referring to
Yeah.
that smell. And now that smell is worse than ever. And he turns to Leverthal. She's standing there with candles all over the fence, right? The pigsty.
Yeah.
And there's another kid next to her, and he's like, "Is that guy Hennessy?" It's like, "Oh, no, 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 no. Hennessy is here." And she pointed to the sty, and then
Yeah.
he says, "Where is he?" It's like, "Here," and points at the pig, and then say, "This is a pig."
Yeah.
And then Leverthal reveals the truth that the pig ate Hennessy. She ate him, and he speaks out of her. And
Yeah.
he's like, "What the hell is going on here?" He's like, they're telling
Yeah.
him the pig's possessed,
Yeah. Well,
so it
and
says,
that's
yeah,
one other major difference, right, with the story and this movie script is that the pig could sort of just talk to everybody in this psychic way, I guess,
yeah,
in the story. But in the movie, it wasn't really clear that he could really talk to people at all. I mean, there was one kid, Jeff, that would like take orders from him.
right. But it's just like
Yeah.
this whisper, and he kind of pulls his ear to the pig's face, and he's like,
Yeah.
sounds like he's
Yeah.
listening to a whisper or something. But in this story, it becomes a lot. In the original story, it becomes a lot more unsettling, right?
Yeah, everybody near the pig hears what the pig is saying. It's not like a
Yes.
special connection with any one person.
I don't think it's supposed to be psychic. I think it at some point doesn't it mention that he speaks with his twisting tongue in
Oh,
the
maybe you're
story?
right. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
maybe right.
And this is interesting because the big quote of this story is that this is the state of the beast, to eat or be eaten.
Right.
And I was reminded, do you remember the last illusion story in the books of blood about the woman that believes she was eaten by a lion?
A tiger.
A
Yeah.
tiger. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. She's
and
like, I'm
that's a really
inside the
strange
tiger.
part
Yeah.
of the story that never made it into the movie.
Right. Right. That
Yeah.
was, I was reminded of that because like
That's true. Yeah.
the beast that eats the person and then eats them not only in body, but in soul. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and Hennessy is interesting as the pig because there's clearly the spirit is in there, but it's also got this animal pig there too. They're not. It's not like one took the place of the other. It's like a weird sort of amalgam of the pig and the kid Hennessy.
Yeah. And so he understands now that what happened was Hennessy killed himself. And he kind of visualizes in his mind the sow coming over to the body of the hung kid
Yeah,
and starting to chew on his toes and eventually eating him. And that this is what makes all these kids believe that the kid lives inside the pig. And so he confronts Leberthal and he tries to go in there because she's like losing her mind, and she attacks him and she's like rakes her nails across his face, and he kind of pushes her away and he's going into the sty, and she falls over some of those candles into the straw and she catches on fire, right, which
yeah,
starts a fire. And
yep. That
and
was really dumb of her to put those candles out in the first place.
right. But this fire spreads in the sty and it also spreads to the pig. So the
Yeah,
sow starts going on fire. And at this point, she still hasn't said anything. The complaints are still an animal's complaints. It's squealing, it's running
yeah,
around, it crashes through the burning fence and runs off into the night. And yeah, so it's just this revulsion. And
yeah,
he looks at Lacey. Lacey's in the sty. He was about to be given to the pig to be eaten, and
right.
he finds the rotting, hanging body of Kevin Hennessy, in the sty,
Yeah,
and he sees that it's been partially eaten. And he runs away with Lacey. He tries to, all the kids are running away at this point, and he just runs back into the building because he needs to call the police and find out what the heck is going on here. Find
yeah,
out, has to report this, right? At this point, he still thinks he can be the hero. And so they run, they reach the building. Lacey is still kind of out of it. Um,
Yeah.
and obviously the kid is not mentally all there, but all the phones have
It's
been
almost like
smashed.
he's been hypnotized or put in a trance by
That's
the
right. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. He sees, and then he sees that all the few phones that are inside the institution have been smashed. And then he remembers, the governor's office, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a phone there. And he goes on to smash the door. And what he finds inside the governor's office is that the reason why the paternal authority is gone from this story, because he is gone. Like the governor has been killed. His office is covered in straw like a pigsty, and
Yeah.
the dead decaying body of the governor is standing up slumped against the wall with his heart eaten out. And
Yeah.
he just kind of says, "Oh, the pig got to him," right?
Yeah.
Because yeah,
Yeah, and and so you kind of learn that it's really the inmates are running the asylum.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like the Dr. Tar and Professor Feather story from Edgar Allan Poe, right? Where
Right.
the
Yeah.
crazy people have disguised themselves as the doctors, and they've been
Yeah.
tarring and feather the staff of the hospital. In this case, so he comes across that big horror, and at some point he just turns around and someone smacks him over the face with a stick, with the club, and he passes out.
Yeah.
And that's why the story is so depressing. I mean, he, of course, spoilers. He sees the lights, right? He loses his mind. He loses consciousness.
Yeah.
He falls and he starts waking up. He sees some lights, like there's candles, but then he starts waking up and he's back at the pigsty, right? He's back at the barn. And not
Yeah.
just that, he
He's hanging
sees
up.
he's hanging up. Yes,
Yeah.
they've tied him up and they start pulling him up, and he's hung up by his neck.
Yeah.
And just before he loses consciousness, he sees the sow, all burned up, probably blind, oozing, and stands up. And Lacey is like riding the pig naked, kind of
Yeah.
guiding him by the ears to where he needs to go. And Lacey has come to become the pig, and the pig is
Yeah.
Hennessy. And the pig just says, "This is the state of the beast, to eat and to be eaten." And just as Redmond loses his consciousness, it's not the pig that starts to eat him, it's Lacey. Lacey has now become like a grunting pig, and he's naked, and he comes down with a little twirling piece of rope out of his ass, just like a pig. And he bites him in the foot, and he starts climbing his body as he's being hung up, and he eventually bites into him. And that's the end of the story.
I thought the
That,
pig bit his foot and Lacey bit him after climbing up on him.
let's see. No, I think it says here the first shock of pain as Lacey's teeth bit off a piece from his foot, and the boy
Oh,
clambered,
okay.
snorting, up his savior's
Gotcha.
body to kiss out his
This time
life.
I listened to the audiobook.
I see. Yeah, yeah. I got the
Yeah,
story open
the
up right in front
audiobook
of
had
me.
an annoying narrator this time.
So I
I
have. Oh
like
yeah.
I really liked the Yattering and Jack narrator. He was great, but this one he had kind of an irritating voice. It's hard to describe.
I see. Yeah, I mean, I got the advantage that I have the story open right in front of me. So,
Yeah.
obviously I can quote stuff directly from it. In the audiobook, you just listened to it last night. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's Lacey. Lacey's become the pig, and the pig is Hennessy. And
Yeah.
it makes it feel like this whole cycle is going to continue,
Right.
because they'll probably say, "Oh, that guy, he never showed up," and
Right.
this
And that's
weird,
that's the other tragic part is that letter is still in his pocket. Right? He
right? Yeah.
never got to deliver the letter. We should also add, in regards to, because one of our comments on Reddit was somebody wanting us to describe the movie. So one key difference also is there's a whole subplot about what Redmond's time when he was a kid and he was at Tetherdown,
That's right.
and there was a kid named Solomon Gaines,
Right.
and Solomon Gaines was a kid that they had all figured out was like a squealer. He had turned them in for their like
Snitch.
drug, yeah, snitch, for their they had a drug ring or something inside there, and he and Solomon Gaines had caught on to it. So they invited him to a party, and then the kids started raping him, and then after that they took a coat hanger and heated it up and branded the word snitch on his back.
That's
And
horrible. Yeah.
so yeah, and so Redmond didn't he told them to just kind of mess him up, but he didn't participate in all that stuff, but he felt horrible because he let it happen.
Yeah.
And Solomon Gaines, over the course of, haunts him in these nightmares that he has. Always sees Solomon like off in the distance and then running away, and he's like, "Wait, Solomon, come back!" And it chases him, and then something bad happens to him, and then he wakes up and it was a dream. And and so you find out something really weird at the end. You find out
Oh
that
boy.
Solomon Gaines is Leverthal, the,
Yes.
the
That is.
psychologist.
Oh God, that is such a weird twist at the
Yeah.
end, because in the movie script, there is a part where, you know, it becomes a bloodbath in the script. Obviously, I mean, that, like you
Yeah.
said, Tether Down is a bigger school, and a lot bigger than this. I mean, in this story, it feels like it's a school that's on its way out. That, a lot of the kids have gone to other institutions, and now there's just maybe like one or two guards in that place, one
Yeah.
psychologist, maybe a couple of teachers, and the governor, who's never
Right.
there.
Yeah.
But in the script, it starts like the first scene is like there's guards patrolling the place with walkie talkies, right? Like,
Yeah.
Roger,
and
everything's
and and they
good
describe
here.
it as having five buildings that are mortar brick and mortar,
Yeah, yeah,
five brick and mortar buildings plus the farm, and so they say it's like a castle.
yeah, yeah.
and
But
and there is a
but
governor in the movie version. There's a governor named
Sir Jim,
Sir Jim. Yeah.
and he's like a priest, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
think
got the
so.
feeling he was like a priest or something. Um, and there's also a scene where he's killed in his office, but it
Yeah.
goes in a much more different way. It
Yeah.
goes in a much more different way because at the point, so this whole thing about, oh yeah, we got a cop because it'll help us get funding, right? So that's the reason why Redmond ends up there. In the
Yeah.
script, they elaborate that, oh, there's going to be like there's going to be a tour by the administrators that are going to come over, and they're going to make a decision on the funding or whatever. So that does happen.
Yeah.
And at some point, the revelation comes that, oh, they've decided that we need to close the school. They didn't like it, and the kids find out that the school is going to close, right? So they kind of like, oh, we're going to be free,
Yeah.
and there's more of us than there are of them. So
So they start a riot.
yeah,
Yeah,
they start a
the kids all
riot,
have
and
knives, and they make because there's like one offhanded line in the short story about how the kids hide razors under their tongues,
yeah,
but the movie script really elaborates on that. It talks about how the kids will even like cut the little thing that connects your tongue to your lower jaw,
the frenulum.
frenulum.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so there's this whole elaborate thing about how all the kids learned how to hide razors under their tongues, and where do they get the razors? Oh, some kids escaped, and they go down the railroad tracks and buy things and make
from the
money, and they bring stuff. They have like a whole system of bringing
contraband.
contraband into the. It's it's really kind of convoluted and doesn't stand up to a lot of scrutiny.
I know, and just the idea of keeping a razor blade under your tongue.
Yeah,
It's unsettling, but there's
yeah,
some dream sequences where all these kids kind of manipulate their tongue and they pull out these razor blades. Even in one of the first altercation, right, that we have in the story,
yeah,
where Lacey's being beat up by another kid. In the story, it's kind of like it ends almost as quickly as it begins, and nothing really
right,
happens much. But in the movie script, Redmond tries to intervene, right? And there's a bunch of
and
kids that pull razor blades out of their mouths and kind of slice at him and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, he gets all slashed up
In his arms.
he gets cuts all over his arms from the razor
Yeah.
blades.
And he's like, how did they get these? And that's when Leverthal says, well, it's contraband, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, what?
Yeah.
And you're not doing anything about this? Like,
Yeah. And then
yeah,
he proposes some ideas to stop some of that from happening. And they're like, oh, that's a good, like, big Sir Jim is like, oh, that's a good idea. We'll do that. Make the windows so they can't open more than 4 inches. And I don't
yeah.
know.
Because it's like, how did they escape? Oh, they escaped through the windows. This building is 150 years old, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like, okay, but you guys are supposed to, even in the short story, the windows have bars on them, right?
Yeah.
It's not like
Yeah.
Hennessy really escaped.
Yeah.
It's not like anybody has ever escaped from that place. I mean, they could if they wanted to, but
Right.
there's this kind of closed off mythology and like almost like a world
Yeah.
that's being closed off from the rest of society, right? That's kind of
But
developing its own.
in the film script, it's a huge place, severely understaffed, and they're almost on the honor system because the kids seem like they could just come and go as they please.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. Pig Blood Blues project. I think it started out with a script by a guy called Vincent Pereira that he wrote for Seraphin in 2003 or 2004. This is revealed in Clive Barker Revelations on the films that got away, the projects that got away. Yeah. But then that script didn't work apparently, and then they handed over to Seraphin's Anthony DiBlasi, who was working at the time, and that's when it 2004 2005 they were working on that, and so they at the time said Mike Medavoy at Phoenix wanted to do it, but I don't think that will follow through, of course.
Yeah.
And then
and this may just be a first draft. I would have liked to have seen what would have come of this, this script. I would hope that it would have fewer dream sequences and that some of the corny things we talked about, maybe would have been, called out a little more by the time they got to the actual movie.
Yeah. Anthony DiBlasi mentioned back in Shock Till You Drop in 2007. Looks like they were still working on that as late as 2007. He said that, we'll be casting soon. It's going to be a foreign sales independent picture. We're not setting up domestic distribution for it yet, but we're gearing up for another 5 months. Could be sooner. And then he says, to me, Blues is a twisted take on a classic ghost story. I love stories about outsiders, and those kids at this juvenile detention center were certainly outsiders. It has this amazing Lord of the Flies element with all these boys trapped together, and this evil entity is stuck in there with them. Where the short story just touches on the supernatural element, I focused a lot on making it a ghost story, but keeping the pig, of course. And apparently,
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I think DiBlasi was not just working with Pig Blood Blues. There was also another project that was not based on the Books of Blood, but I think it was called New York Resurrection, which I haven't really heard much about. I don't know if you can find anything about that.
I can look into that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that we have the script for Down Satan also.
But there's these amazing ideas and amazing stories that could be adapted that from the Books of Blood. I mean, the Madonna, that would be a wild ride, right? The whole idea of the Madonna and the guy that finds these abandoned pools and there's these creatures.
This one, Pig Blood Blues, seems like not a very expensive thing to film, right? I mean, as far as
true.
like locations and effects and stuff like that, it doesn't, and limited cast, it doesn't really seem like it would be that. It's one location pretty much, so it seem like it seems like it would be pretty doable. I don't know what it was that put the halt on this particular one. Maybe it had to do with how the other movies were doing. I'm not sure. Like Dread and Book of Blood. I mean, I like Book of Blood. I thought it was a great film, but I don't know how well it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that the first guy who did the first draft, Vincent Pereira, wrote at a website called film-411.com in 2004, he said, Pig Blood Blues, and this is exactly what you're just saying. Pig Blood Blues is set in one location with a limited cast, could certainly be done for just a few $1 million tops. It's really my attempt to truly do indie horror movie, one which will approach not just the horror, but also sexuality from a very European standpoint, something I doubt I'd be allowed to do with a bigger project. Although it's based on an existing story, the project feels very personal to me, much like A Better Place was, whereas Autograph was always meant to be more fun. I think he's talking about some of his previous projects here.
Yeah.
And he says, I was going to make a serious gay themed horror film based on Clive Barker's Pig Blood Blues as my next project, but alas, it looks like isn't going to happen. The upshot is I'm going to take all the material I created on my own for my Pig Blood Blues script, and I did create a ton of original material to flesh it out and construct an entirely new story around it, so all is not lost. So I don't know if that ever materialized for Vincent Pereira, but that was the first attempt.
So with the film, with the script that we read, there was a whole other element of like the riot, right? And the kids taking over and killing all of the staff and feeding them all to the pig.
That's
And
right.
chasing Redmond and Lacey around. They're trying to escape. They get out through a window or a fire escape.
Yeah.
And then there's one other guard, like Adam, a guard or a teacher, I can't remember which, who falls off of the fire escape and hits the ground.
Yeah.
Or no, Redmond falls off the fire escape. He
It's
gets
Redmond.
pulled
Yeah.
in through one of the windows. Yeah.
Yeah. But then they run away. Lacey, in what reminds me a little bit of the the Chainsaw Massacre film. Lacey gets on a truck that's driving by and he's like, oh, I'm free. He gets on the bed of the truck. And Redmond is super exhausted. He's hurt bad. He's like dragging himself over a little meadow of flowers. And he sees across from that little meadow, he sees like a graveyard.
Yeah.
And then what he sees there is the burnt pig. But the burnt pig all of a sudden is moving towards him.
Yeah.
And stands up, like still smoking, ooze, pustules coming out of his burnt skin. And the movie ends. You get the idea.
Looking at each other, and it says like Redmond knows that he's gonna die. And
yeah,
it's kind of, and one interesting also point that bothered me because I didn't really quite understand where they were going with it was that Solomon Gaines, who became Leverthal, somehow was the person who orchestrated all of this and made it so that Hennessy could merge with the pig when he died. And it was all Solomon Gaines's idea to do this whole thing, and knew that somehow that this supernatural thing would happen with them.
I didn't get that orchestrated that. I got more that Leverthal went back to the school. Of course, the reason why we know Leverthal is Solomon is because at one point she takes off her, her shirt and it exposes her breasts, but then we see that the mark is still there saying snitch, the branded mark.
Yeah.
So it's once that kid was taken out after that horrible thing happened to him, eventually they transitioned and became a psychologist and came back to the same school where that happened to them. And got involved into this whole mythology. But in the beginning of the script, I think there's a scene where it's Hennessy that's got all the kids around him in the barn. And he's saying that, to become a man is to die. And the state of the beast is to eat and be eaten. And there's a ritualistic suicide murder kind of scene, right? I mean, Kevin Hennessy puts the rope around his neck. The kids all attack him like Caesar on the steps of the Roman Forum, and they stab him and they leave their knives on him. They pull him up and he's hanging and dying, and the blood is falling down onto the pig, and the pig is going into a frenzy and he starts eating the body of Hennessy.
But they update that opening scene at the end, and they insert Leverthal into it. And Leverthal is explaining how she was involved from the beginning, and
Oh, yeah. Okay.
she orchestrated this, and it was her idea to have Hennessy, kill himself and be eaten by the pig so that he could live forever.
Because he was the Nietzschean Superman. He
Well, and
thought that.
because she hated the school so much, or the
Yeah.
tether down, she hated it so much that she wanted it to burn to the ground, or to be destroyed. And this was her
Yes.
convoluted plan to make that happen.
Yeah. But what's really fantastic about that ending is just that when Redmond sees the pig stands and staring at Redmond.
Oh,
And
like
it
on two
said,
feet?
I think so. It says here, um, Redmond stops when he's out of breath, turns, looks up at the
Mm-hmm.
sky to see the smoke from the burning building in the distance. He sits
Yeah.
defeated. His whole life is a failure. Redmond rises and resumes walking. As he turns the corner of a gravestone, he sees it, the pig. It stands, staring at him, flesh melting off its body, boils and blisters oozing everywhere. They're both on a standoff. Redmond is frozen, and the pig, inescapable. Cut to black, the end. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, wow. Lacey gets off, but Redmond apparently is left to be eaten by the pig, uh,
Yeah.
which is kind of an open ending, but at the same time, it's pretty final.
Yeah.
But like you said, we never really see the pig talking throughout the whole script. It's only just like Jeff, this kid who goes over to the pig and like, oh,
Like,
listens to
what
what
was
he's
that?
saying.
Oh, you want me to kill the guard? What's his
Yeah,
face? Okay.
yeah. So I think it's a lot cooler in the original story because the pig does speak. The pig
Yeah.
does have the spirit of Hennessy inside him. And it makes sense in a weird, convoluted way that this would create this mythology with the kids because there's definitely something supernatural
Right.
happening here. Something that is completely like, beyond any social norm or any sort of idea about what we think is real. It is real and it is happening. And
Yeah.
it's horrible. It's just this unsettling, horrible idea of having this pig that has become the de facto authority after
Yeah.
eating the governor's heart in that particular little subculture of the tether down
Yeah.
school, which becomes this isolated bubble of horror and suffering.
Yeah. There's also a really kind of disturbing scene in the movie script where Jeff has two of the guards, and he's got a hammer, and he's
Oh
like,
yeah.
okay, heads or tails? Do you want to get hit by the blunt end or the claw end?
Right, right. Yep. Very like Julian Hellraiser.
Right. Yeah.
Um, it's
And at one
just
point, he has a gun, right? And I think he shoots one of the guards, or
yeah, yeah.
I can't remember. He might have changed his mind and
And
hit him
and
with the
and
knife, or
Sir Jim, who plays kind of like the governor figure in the script,
yeah,
um, during the big riot at the end where the kids are running loose and killing everybody with blades and stuff.
yeah,
He he's trying to get his secretary Carol on the intercom to send a letter or something, and then she's not answering. He goes out and he finds out that the kids are here and they're all armed, and he runs to his desk, gets a gun, and then puts it in his mouth and tries to kill himself, but there's no
yeah.
bullets. And one of the kid opens the bullets, drops them on the ground, and
I
says,
think Jeff. Yeah.
I thought you were gonna shoot us, you coward."
Yeah.
And that's when they slice him up and they kill him.
Yeah, they lunge at him, and it's
Yeah,
sort of implied. You hear him screaming off camera.
it really shows him reduced to being like the worm that we've thought he was all this time.
Yeah,
It's a very interesting story, and very scary. It involves a lot of themes here that are awkward
yeah,
and unsettling. And I mean, the pig itself. I've looked into the symbolism of pigs and sows.
hmm,
They can go either way. I mean, they can be like good luck, prosperity,
Yeah.
fertility, transformation and rebirth because of the way they dig and root in the earth. And yeah, but they also have that dark side that people associate with the pigs, with greed, gluttony, and cleanliness. Look at Animal Farm by George Orwell,
Right.
right? I mean, the pigs there are the representing the exploitative government.
Hmm.
But I think in the real world, I mean, they can be really smart too. I mean, they can be very intelligent. You know, pigs can show a lot of intelligence. It's just that people are used to thinking of pigs as this animal that wallows in his own dirt, but it doesn't have to, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I remember my grandfather's farm. There were pigs there,
Hmm.
and they were pretty they were pretty big.
Yeah.
I remember pigs eating slop, and I remember my grandparents and my uncles killing a pig um, with a knife, which is something I don't think I should have seen that at my tender age. But
Yeah.
you fatten up the pig so you can eat them. So at some
Yeah.
point between fattening up the pig and eating him, you got to kill the pig and you got to dismantle the pig.
Yeah.
It's it's a horrible thing to see because the pig will fight through it because of course you have to stab him in the heart and then you have to cut his throat. And
Ugh, yeah.
yeah, I really don't think I should have seen that,
Yeah.
but it's a horrible thing.
Yeah.
That's enough to turn your stomach and be like, I'm never wanting to eat bacon ever again, and
Right. Yeah.
it'll make you go vegan to see what happens to animals.
Yeah. It's a
Um,
disturbing, kind of more intimate story than some of the others, and
yeah,
it's and it's scary and kind of inescapable sort of. There's no, like you said, there's no hero.
but I do remember hearing when I was a kid that don't put your hand in the uh, pig pen because they might bite you. They can eat you.
Right.
So yeah, there was that omnivorous nature that we associate with the pig that he can
Right.
eat anything, including other creatures, including biting the hand that feeds him.
Right.
Um, in
Well,
one of
and
the scenes in the original story, right?
yeah,
The two kids are have escaped in the middle of the night and they go to the pig pen to give meat to the pig, but
bacon.
the
Yeah.
bacon, yeah, bacon of all things,
Yeah.
because the pig is demanding white meat. After it ate Hennessy, it developed a taste for human meat. And the kids are saying, hey, we couldn't get you Lacey yet, but we got
Because
this.
he's being protected by Redmond, and that's when he's like,
Right.
"Oh, Redmond is my enemy."
But as the kids are kind of feeding the pig, kind of scared, right? Because this pig holds all this power over them. He
Yeah.
takes the pieces of bacon, but in the last piece of bacon, he also takes a tip of a finger from one of the kids, right? To
Yeah.
show that, hey, I mean business and I need more meat now,
Yeah.
you know, like he wants that. He wants
He
that.
says, "I want something lacy." Like he was
Lacey,
making a
yeah.
joke. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's really scary to imagine a pig. Um,
Yeah.
I like that story a lot. I like that story
Yeah.
a lot.
So we had some comments on Reddit, right? So Rawmaker says, "Was the script by Anthony DiBlasi?" Yes, we did talk about that, and that's the last name I remember being attached to the film. I liked what he did with the movie Dread, so it would have been interesting to see what would have come of Pig Blood Blues. So we kind of described most of the key differences, I think, with that.
That's right.
Empirically Incorrect said, "Oh, I loved this one." And Lost My Mojo 84 said, "I never knew there was a movie script. Could you talk about it in detail, please?" I think we did a pretty good job with that. Flaky Web 2439 said, "What an awesome story to go with. This is the one that gave me the worst nightmares. It's disturbing on so
Oh,
many
yeah.
levels. I just love it." Yeah.
Sure is. It
Well,
sure
in the
is.
script they incorporated a whole bunch of nightmares into the movie itself.
Yeah. Um, yep. So very interesting stuff going on here. But that
Yeah.
was Pig Blood Blues. I mean, maybe one day we'll be able to see this developed into a movie. Um, I hope they stay loyal to the original material.
Yeah.
Although the story itself is kind of short, so for a full feature film, you'd have to add a lot more background and a lot more stuff to it because you can read this story probably in maybe half an hour, I would say.
Yeah, the audiobook was exactly an hour long.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is the
But
state
yeah,
of the
when you're
beast.
reading it's a little faster than when you're listening to it.
Right, right.
Yeah. And
Um,
I think yeah, and so I don't hold it against the script for padding it out with extra characters and stuff, but there were parts of it where it felt like it was also padded out with dream sequences and with extra killing, of people that are just throwaway characters.
there was a thread on Reddit on the Clive Barker subreddit from 3 years ago. Someone was saying, "I don't understand what happened in Pig Blood Blues," and then there were some interesting replies of people who were trying to give their own interpretation of it. One of them said that they didn't believe it was a spirit of Hennessy inside the pig, but some evil spirit. This is because Hennessy
What?
supposedly killed himself in the barn, but I believe the way his spirit kills is by wrapping a rope around the victim's neck, which is what happens to Redmond, who was just an offering to the salvation of Lacey, who in turn was being offered for the salvation of the other students until Redmond was killed by Lacey. Conclusion: Hennessy was an offering and Lacey was an offering, which was replaced by Redmond's body.
Eh.
Uh, I don't know about that. But
Yeah,
another thing that
I
they
think
mentioned, hmm,
uh, for me, I think it's really kind of about this idea of transubstantiation, like you're eating you take in the spirit of the thing that you're eating, right? Or the
yes,
idea that cannibals, get the strength of whatever they're eating, or that and that
the bravery of their enemies if they eat their hearts and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, that kind of stuff, right? And this charismatic kid had some kind of kind of like Nick's had some kind of greater understanding of the world and the universe and metaphysics, and was able to sort of keep himself in the world after he died,
Right.
through an understanding of this process.
And also, there's a part in the story that mentions that sometimes the sow wanted the kids to come in and suckle from her, naked
Right.
as
Yeah.
piglets. And I think that's what happens to Lacey at the end because he suckles from her like a piglet, and then he becomes a piglet. He becomes
Yeah.
a little snorting pig.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it it's a different way of eating the soul. It's like in the case of Lacey, it wasn't just a consumption of the body; it was a consumption of the
Hmm.
soul. Like he became part of the sow as well.
And
And
there
it's
was
it's
also
hinted, yeah. Mm,
something we didn't talk about. There was a Peter Pan sort of element to Hennessy, that he didn't want to ever grow up. He wanted to stay a kid forever, and
yeah.
that was this was his solution.
Oh, and of course, the Leberthal did have an affair with did have a relationship with Kevin. I think that's from the script, though, right? No, it's from the original story, actually. Yes, that Leverthal herself had a sexual relationship with Hennessy.
Oh yeah, because he was
Yeah.
so charismatic.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was 17, and he was worried about turning 18 and getting sent off to a regular grown-up prison, and he
Yeah.
wanted to stay there forever.
Yep.
Yeah.
So very, I remember being very disturbed when I read this story, and
Yeah,
and
me
the
too.
scene of him going into the governor's office and finding the straw on the floor
Yeah.
and him with his heart eaten out. It's a very shocking
Yeah.
thing, but it explains why he's so conspicuously absent. The pig has taken
Right.
over. It's the pig is the authority in that place, not the governor anymore.
And it also gives you a sense of immediacy, right? Like that this isn't really an old conspiracy, that it's all fairly recent that all this kind of stuff happened.
Yeah.
Hennessy getting killed and the governor getting his heart eaten and all that probably wasn't, too long ago, since before Redmond got there.
Yeah. One quote from Clive Barker. Of course, you know Clive Barker loves that movie, Eyes Without a Face, Les Yeux Sans Visage, and he
Yeah.
mentioned once that if you buy the American DVD, there's also a short film called Blood of the Beasts. If you're a vegetarian already, this might turn you. If you're not vegetarian already, this might turn you.
Oh yeah.
Franjou filmed it in the slaughterhouses of Paris, and it's pretty appalling viewing. 1 out of every 9 pigs wasn't killed by the slaughtering device and ends up being skinned alive. This is real
Ugh.
horror. As a veggie, I say, God bless him for making this documentary. So, we
You're
should be
kind of far
kinder
away
to.
from the microphone.
Oh, I was just saying we should be kinder to animals.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we move away from being the beast, right? The state of the beast is to eat or be eaten.
Right.
You can remove the beast from yourself if you stop eating beasts.
Yeah. Yep. Well, coming next, we're working on an interview. We're still trying to get that one. Actually, 2
Scheduled.
interviews. Yeah,
Mhm.
we've got it scheduled for February, the one that we've been working on. And there
That's
was
right.
another one another one we've been talking to also that we don't have a date yet. Um, the Quartet of Torment, probably also maybe next month in February. Not sure. Disc 4 with Pete Atkins,
Mhm.
talking about Hellraiser Bloodline. Um, Jericho Squad will come back soon as we get that set up. And the commentary on Zoopocalypse. And that was one thing I found the script for that too. So
Wow.
we can read that. I put it in our
Cool.
Facebook chat.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how that started out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
and then
then
we'll do an audio commentary for what actually became like that animated film, right?
that's right. That's right.
At this point,
Uh,
none of us have seen it, so we don't know anything. We don't know much about it.
yep. One last thing we'd like to add here is that, if you remember Ed Martinez, he was the editor of Cenobium. He's a special effects artist, lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he's got this YouTube channel where you can see a lot of interviews he's done with people mostly from special effects industry, and a lot of them are from people who have worked in the Hulu Hellraiser. He's got that interview with Russell Effects. He's got one with Keith Thompson, who was the designer and artist for the new Cenobites. And the latest one he put about 3 months ago was with Mikey Rotella on sculpting the Chatterer for the Hulu
Mm-hmm.
Hellraiser. So, if you haven't seen those are pretty good. It's on our BarkerCast recommended playlist.
Yeah,
And go ahead and give him a subscribe and a like.
yeah, yeah. And those interviews regarding the Hulu Hellraiser have got a lot of views. Those are pretty popular.
They are.
Yeah. All right. Well, in this podcast having no beginning will have no end. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have subscribed or followed our podcast. You can find the Clive Barker Podcast wherever you find audio. Show notes for this episode, as well as news and reviews, can be found at our website at www.clivebarkercast.com. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial podcast and blog that's not affiliated with Clive Barker or Seraphim Inc. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans. You can chat with us on our Facebook BarkerCast listeners group, our Facebook page, Reddit, Blue Sky, or our Discord server. Have you already bought our book? The BarkerCast Interviews Occupy Midian, available in Amazon hardcover, Kindle, and Apple Books. Join our Patreon and become a patron to get access to exclusive stuff, pick an episode topic, or maybe join in the discussion. You can also buy a t-shirt in our TeePublic store. Just go to teepublic.com/stores/BarkerCast. Leave a voicemail for us on the SpeakPipe link on our blog, and we might put it in the episode. Opening and ending music generously provided by Ray Norrish.
Thanks for listening.